Good morning to you all and welcome back. You're watching World News and I'm your host, Klaudia Czerwińska. On Monday morning, Europe and Ukraine are waking up to the conclusions of the Zelensky-Trump meeting, which took place in Florida on Sunday evening. For more commentary on the latest in relation to what was a very important meeting for the future of Ukraine, in Oz Kataji's report from Kyiv.
Both the Ukrainians and the Americans sounded positive following the conclusion of those negotiations in Florida on Sunday. However, the devil really is in the details, and on those details, neither leader sounded positive that they had finalized many of the contentious issues in this 20-point peace plan. Those include the final status of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, the parts occupied by Russia and the parts still controlled by Ukraine, which Russia is demanding Ukraine withdraw from. The other major contentious issues include the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and control of that going forward, and the cast iron security guarantees that Ukraine is looking for to prevent Russia from invading for a third time. Now, both leaders, as I said, sounded positive following the conclusion of that meeting.
If you think about it, we're going to have I really believe we're probably, Mr. President, by far closer than ever before with both parties. We had some times when he was close and President Putin wasn't. Then when President Putin was close and he wasn't, you saw that in the White House. But I think they both want to see it happen. They keep fighting and they keep dying. No good. But if things don't happen, they keep fighting and they keep dying. And we don't want that to happen. He doesn't want it to happen. President Putin doesn't want it to happen either. Okay? Thank you very much, everybody.
And we discussed all the aspects of the peace framework, which includes, and we have great achievements, 20-point peace plan, 90% agreed, and U.S.-Ukraine security guarantees, 100% agreed. U.S.-Europe-Ukraine security guarantees, almost agreed. Military dimension, 100% agreed. We also had a joint productive call with European leaders, like President Trump said already, and a lot of leaders, including NATO and the EU. And we agreed that our teams will meet in upcoming weeks to finalize all discussed matters. And we agreed with President Trump that he will host us, and maybe in Washington, European leaders and Ukrainian delegation, yes, in January. And Ukraine is ready for peace.
So one of the key takeaways will be that this meeting could have gone substantially worse for Kyiv, considering the way the meetings have gone between President Trump and President Zelensky in the past. However, all signs point to a positive meeting between the two delegations in Florida. However, once again, the big question is, are we any closer to a final agreement? It doesn't look like we are any closer to a final agreement between Ukraine and the Americans yet, and that's to say nothing of reaching a final agreement with the Americans and the Russians. So a very difficult negotiating process still to come. The question mark will be now what the Russians make of the negotiations that took place in Sunday in Florida. It's Oz Kataji reporting from Kyiv for TVP World.
And as the talks came to a close in Florida, those whose lives will be most affected by the decisions made, Ukrainian civilians, have also voiced their feelings and concerns about the outcomes of the meeting of the presidents. Here's what Kyiv residents had to say.
Unfortunately, now the talks won't have an effect. The talks are good for the people to understand what is going on. I don't think the war will end soon, and we yet have to wait for the deal to be reached. Even after the deal, Russia could still attack Ukraine.
It has already been said many times before that the war is about to end. It is just dragging out the time. That's all it is.
Putin doesn't need territory, he doesn't need Donbas, he wants to destroy the Ukrainians. He is destroying us as a nation. The territories are a matter of principle for him.
In the aftermath of the meeting, European leaders spoke to President Zelensky and Trump. In a social media post, the French President Emmanuel Macron has announced the meeting of the Coalition of the Willing scheduled for the beginning of January in Paris. Here's more.
Along with several other European leaders, I took part this evening in an exchange with Presidents Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Donald Trump. I then spoke with President Zelenskyy. We are making progress on the security guarantees that will be central to building a just and lasting peace. We will bring together the countries of the Coalition of the Willing in Paris in early January to finalize each country's concrete contributions.
It's concerning that Donald Trump equates Moscow and Kyiv, said editor-in-chief of the Kyiv Post Bogdan Nahailo, speaking to TVP World against the backdrop of the meeting of the presidents of Ukraine and the United States in Florida.
He doesn't make a distinction between the aggressor, the imperialist, and the defender, a European country defending itself. And this is what is disgusting. So when I watched it tonight, hoping against hope, that perhaps there would be a different tone given the strong European support and Canadian support behind Zelensky, that perhaps there would be a slightly different tone in Trump's statements, especially as he's under such heavy attacks at home, Epstein, the economy, falling ratings, etc., etc. But no, it's the same line, you know, the kind of you have to give, he has to give, but we expect you to give more. You know, the old sort of story behind the scene of he has the cards, I have the cards, you don't have the cards, Zelensky. Pathetic start.
The party of Kosovo's incumbent prime minister has claimed victory in Sunday's snap election, but is likely to fall short of an independent majority. The Vetevendozie party racked up 49.3% of the votes, with only conditional ballots and votes from the Kosovar diaspora in Western Europe remaining to be counted. This means an improvement for Kosovo's Prime Minister Albin Kurti, whose party won some 42% of the votes in February. 10 months of a political deadlock ensued as the country's MPs failed to choose the parliamentary speaker despite over 50 attempts, and no stable government formed, first prompting protests and then the snap election. After the partial results were announced, Prime Minister Kurti invited opposition groups to cooperate with his party, but the prospective €1 billion in soon-to-expire loans from the EU and from the World Bank still seem in jeopardy.
Allow me to start by thanking.
And now to Serbia. The pressure on the Serbian government is growing, with protesters calling for snap elections at hundreds of standpoints established for citizens to sign a petition to force President Aleksandar Vučić to call an early election. The efforts come as the U.S. ramps up external pressure on the country by introducing sanctions on its only gasoline producer, NIS. Sonia Gatabiszczan brings us more on social unrest in Serbia in her latest report.
Serbian students are calling for snap elections, and on Sunday they intensified their efforts to make sure that happens. At almost 500 standpoints across 100 municipalities in Serbia, they invited citizens to sign a petition demanding snap elections from the Serbian president Aleksandar Vučić.
The purpose of today's initiative is to show the scale of support for the student movement.
I was among the first who came here early this morning to sign the petition these young people put forth. I think this is a magnificent idea. This student movement cannot be compared to earlier ways of confronting this government. This is authentic, new, and different from anything else.
Serbian students have been protesting for over a year. The movement began following a fatal collapse of the canopy of the railway station in Novi Sad in November 2024 that killed 16 people. Protesters blamed the tragedy on corruption and considered the government illegitimate.
I think this entire year plus has been really struggling and difficult for President Vučić. This is by far the largest crisis that the Serbian Progressive Party and him individually have been faced with ever since they've assumed power in 2012.
Part of the reason behind that is also external pressure. In October, the United States sanctioned Serbia's only petrol producer, NIS, as part of broader measures against Russia's energy sector, with the company being majority owned by the Russian energy giant Gazprom.
If you go to the gas station that's owned by NIS, you can't pay with a Visa card. You can only pay for certain things with cash.
But while Vučić is already feeling the heat, some experts note that exerting even more pressure could be in the best interest of the region.
Without a peaceful Serbia and democratic Serbia, there is no also peace in the whole region in the Western Balkans. This is the question of national security, and that's precisely why the European Union should put more pressure on the government of Serbia to push for democracy.
Serbia has been a candidate for EU membership since 2012, but some experts suggest Vučić may not be in a rush for the country to join the bloc.
Because he has consolidated power in his hands, and his ultimate goal is to remain in power for as long as possible. And of course, he is going to say all those words, how he wants to join the European Union, because he needs the European Union money for his political survival. But his heart is actually in Beijing and Moscow.
The situation in the country prompted the European Commission to publish some of its harshest criticism to date in its 2025 report on Serbia. The Commission was particularly concerned about fundamental rights in the country, noting instances of violence against protesters and journalists, including excessive use of force by the police. For TVP World, I'm Sonia Agata-Biszczan.
China has conducted live fire drills less than 50 kilometers off Taiwan's coast, as the Chinese Foreign Ministry says that any attempt to stymie, quote, China's reunification or incorporating Taiwan will not succeed. The 2 million-strong military wing of the Chinese Communist Party, known as the People's Liberation Army, deployed troops, warships, fighter jets, and artillery to rehearse strikes on land and maritime targets. The two-day exercises will also include a simulation of encircling Taiwan's major ports. China's war games were launched 11 days after the U.S. announced a package of over $11 billion in arms sales to Taiwan, the largest in the island's history. In response, Beijing threatened to, quote, take forceful measures. The ongoing sixth major military drills in 3 years have stoked fears in Taiwan, which has deployed soldiers and showcased American-made hardware in a simulation of a standoff. A flood alert has been put in place by the mayor of Elbląg, a city in northern Poland, after the local river levels exceeded the warning threshold. The sudden rise of water levels in the river running through Elbląg was caused by strong winds on the Vistula, the country's largest river.
A flood alert has been put in place by the mayor of Elbląg, a city in northern Poland, after the local river's level exceeded the warning threshold. The sudden rise of water levels in the river running through Elbląg was caused by strong winds on the Vistula, the country's largest river with many tributaries.
I think the river has risen about 1 meter, and from what I have heard, it's still rising slowly, but it's rising.
I'm from Elbląg. I came here because it has flooded several times, especially there, under the highway.
Although the alert would worry most, the residents appear as cool as a cucumber.
You can see the breakwaters are up. It's the same every year, and we are used to it. I'm not worried about it.
I came because I live near the river and heard on TV that there's a flood risk. I wanted to see what it looks like. We're used to situations like this.
Expecting trouble, the city authorities started preparing for a flood the previous evening.
Our operations actually began yesterday at 7 p.m. Due to disturbing weather conditions. The mayor decided to protect both banks of the river with flood sleeves.
With all necessary services on standby and both authorities and residents constantly monitoring the river level, the people of Elbląg are ready for whatever comes next.
And so this would be all the latest news for now. Thank you for joining me. I'm Klaudia Czerwińska, and I hope to see you back here on TVP World on top of every hour for a portion of some of the latest news.